Jay. Appreciate you having us here and letting us share our story about this paper with you. Great to be in a room full of bail agents. Always is. Every night at 9 o'clock Texas time, I call my mother. She'll be 100 years old the 12th of May. And so when I called her last night, she said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Las Vegas." She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to give a talk tomorrow afternoon." And she said, "Who are you talking to?" I said, "I'm talking to those people that fed and clothed your grandchildren all their life." And she said to tell you in that case, she wishes you the best. I cast around for a word. I wondered if I could find one word that would very aptly describe this effort that Jay and I made to convince the American Bar Association that you indeed are valuable. And the word that immediately came to mind is the word apologetic. And apologetic is the discipline of defending a position through the systematic use of good, sound information. We get it from the Greek root word apologia, which is the same place we get our word apology. But an apology and an apologetic are vastly different in meaning. For example, if I said, I've done something wrong and I need to tell you about it. I've spent a lot of years in the bail bond business. And in the bail bond business, I've been responsible for putting up the security to guarantee that a person who promises that they'll come back to court actually comes back to court, and they have to pay a premium for me to put up that security. And that's what I've been doing. And you know, maybe we should have just been taking them at their word all those years. And so I'm sorry for what I did, and I hope you'll forgive me for it. That's an apology. But if I say, you know, I want to tell you something I'm really proud of. I've spent a lot of years being a retail seller of bail bonds. And a lot of good has come to my community because of that. I have supported my state and my county economically. I have promoted public safety in my neighborhood. And I've been a very meaningful, positive part of the administration of justice in the jurisdiction where I operate. And I want to give you some good, hard evidence that my feelings about myself are justified. And I hope you'll come around to understand that I am what I say I am. That is an apologetic. What we attempted to do was craft an apologetic for the commercial bail bonding industry. Now, why does the commercial bail bond industry need to defend itself in the first place? Against what? Well, certainly against two things, and our paper addresses these two things. We need to be defended against the wrong idea of many of the people in the public, business leaders, opinion leaders, politicians, and just regular citizens. We need to be defended against the wrong idea they have about who we are and what we do and what professionals we really are. They need to understand that there is a bigger difference between us and the people we bond out than just which side of the bars we're on. And that was Jay's job in the paper, was to demonstrate your very high level of professionalism and show the ABA crowd, that austere group of lawyers in America, and all the business people they represent, and try to turn those lawyers into our emissaries of goodwill. It was Jay's job to try and show those people that you are every bit the professional of the property and casualty agent who sells the performance and payment and completion bond to the general contractor who is building the new gymnasium down at the high school or the new educational building down at the First Baptist Church. You're just as professional as that agent and just as much to be appreciated because, as Jay said, you give them an extra bang for their buck, and I mean the community. You help keep them safe. So certainly we need to be defended against that wrong impression that they have of us. An impression they probably got from reading a paperback crime novel or watching a reality TV show or seeing a movie. And I think Jay did an excellent job of that. But we really need to be defended against a second thing, and that is those who want you done away with. We need to be defended against those who advocate for the eradication of private sector commercial bail bonding. And there are people out there who are just that way. They're dead set on getting rid of you. If you attended the 11 o'clock meeting led by Melanie and Dennis, you certainly got a taste of that, about what they're saying about you, who they are and what they're saying about you, and what you might do to combat what they're saying about you. They've been out there for a long time. They've been after you for a long time. My goodness, I guess 25 years ago maybe, or maybe longer, there was formed up an organization called the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies. It goes by the acronym NAPSA, and it was 25 or 30 years ago when they were formed up, and they were made up of the executives and the managers of the hundreds of pretrial service agencies around the country. And they had people on their boards. They had a judge or two, and they had 2 or 3 liberal law school professors and people like that on their board. And the insurance companies that underwrite bail bonds began dealing with trying to prevent those people from putting you out of business years and years ago. And we were very successful at that. We beat them back pretty doggone good. I think for 2 reasons, one of which is they didn't have any money, and 2 of which is they didn't have any facts. We had all the facts. They didn't have any facts. They said they did a better job than you do, but they didn't have anything to prove it. We said we did a better job than they did, and we had something to prove it. We had the Bureau of Justice Statistics bulletins that said every 2 years it had studied another 55,000 people and tracked them for 2 years, and came back every 2 years and said, yep, commercial bail bonding wins again. It gets people back to court a whole lot better than anybody else. So we were able to handle them pretty good all that time. And then 4 or 5 years ago, a new player came on the scene, an outfit called the Pretrial Justice Institute, and it picked up the banner of NAPSA. And it said, we're going to be the enforcement arm to carry out the wishes of the directors of NAPSA. It had that right there on PJI's webpage until we blasted them up pretty good about it, and they took it off. But at any rate, there they were. And they were different from NAPSA, and they are different from NAPSA. And their big difference from NAPSA is not that they have the facts, because they still don't have the facts, but they got the money. And they get a lot of that money from the United States Department of Justice. The Pretrial Justice Institute goes to the United States Department of Justice and secures big funding from the United States Department of Justice, which means that the Internal Revenue Service takes your tax dollars and gives some of it to Eric Holder's Justice Department, who gives some of that to his Bureau of Justice Statistics, who gives some of that to the Pretrial Justice Institute, who takes it and travels around the country like an itinerant evangelist, preaching against you and calling for your elimination to people like county officials, judges, state legislators, sheriffs, police, victims' rights groups, and all of those kind of folks. In other words, your tax dollar is being used to put you out of business. Now, that's the difference between the Pretrial Justice Institute and NAPSA. And if you wonder if the Pretrial Justice Institute and NAPS are tied in, and if the Pretrial Justice Institute really wants you gone, let me read for you. Thank you. I need my cheaters. I'm getting old, folks. This is from the Honorable Truman A. Morrison III, who at the time he made these remarks was board chairman of the Pretrial Justice Institute for 2011-2012. And he's giving these remarks at the closing session in San Diego of the annual conference of guess who? The National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies. Now, I'm going to read here what he said. I want to talk directly with you for a few minutes about the elephant in the room in any discussion about bail reform in America in 2010. An elephant that has been with us for a long time, an elephant we have all known we have to deal with. We have repeatedly put off doing so until another day because the task has seemed so daunting. That elephant is spelled M-O-N-E-Y. It is time that every woman and man seriously concerned about bail reform in America faces the fact there will finally be no complete and lasting reform unless we can substantially banish money bail, that's you, from the halls of pretrial justice. You know, years ago, we made some attempts at peaceful coexistence with these people. We had, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, I guess, we sent a group of people holding out olive branches to them and had a meeting. Armando was down in Florida somewhere, wasn't it, 15 years or so ago, and some of our leadership met with some of their leadership, and they just, you know, and what we were saying to them was this: look, there's something we both do well. Let's get together and let's both do what we do well. You interview new inmates for special needs, people that need counseling, et cetera, or drug rehab treatment or whatever. You go do that. If the county cares enough to support those people and their needs and try to reintegrate them back into society and they want to spend the money to do that, you go do that function. You do that well. We don't want to do that. Let us go do what we do better than you can ever do it. Let us take people out of pretrial custody, secure their release, and get them back to court when they're supposed to come to court. We can do that really, really well. We've been doing it well for 200 years. And you can't do it well at all. So you do what you do, let us do what we do, and everybody wins. They weren't interested. There were a number of things like that. Their attitude is best depicted, I think, by a little anecdote. I remember maybe 10 years, 12, 13 years ago, I went to one of their conferences, one of the NAPSA conferences, and it was up at a hotel in Chicago, and there were a lot of people there. And I just went and registered and paid the registration fee and went to their classes and sat in their seminars. And the last thing they had was a big closing banquet, and they had a keynote speaker, and I sat way at the back of the room, and when he was talking, he was railing about commercial bail and about how there only needed to be one means of monitoring people who were out, and that needed to be pretrial service agencies, not the private sector, and on and on and on. And he finished and he invited questions, and I raised my hand and he recognized me and I stood up and I said, don't you think maybe there's room for some collaboration between the public and private sectors? And I explained that idea about working together, and his exact response to me was, quote, whatever we do, we must be rid of these vampire bail bondsmen, end quote. Now, our paper tries to get beyond that. And you know, folks, you can put yourself in harm's way by trying to establish friendly relations with somebody who just doesn't want you there. About 16 months or so ago, I decided I decided that I wanted to run one more marathon before I hung up my shoes. I'd run a number of them, and one I'd never run, although I'd run in New York and a number of the major cities. I'd never run the Los Angeles Marathon. I want to run the Los Angeles Marathon. So I started training, and I was doing all right, and I got down. My training schedule on this particular Sunday called for a 22-mile run, so I went out, and I did fine, but right at the end of it, something twitched in my right knee. And I went to the chiropractor, and he sent me to the family practitioner, who sent me to an orthopedist, who sent me to the surgery room, and they replaced my knee. And the orthopedic surgeon said, "Now you can't run anymore." And he said, "If you have to get hard cardiovascular activity, you try swimming or riding one of these road bicycles, these distance road bikes." Well, I didn't want to swim, so I got me one of those bikes, and I started riding that bike. And my wife asked me one day, she said, "Why don't you just go out and ride 5 or 6 miles like normal people?" I said, "Hell, I wouldn't even air up a tire for 5 or 6 miles." And so I was out on a long ride one Sunday morning, and I was on my way home. And I came over this viaduct, and I was on a little bit of a downgrade, and I was clipping good. I was probably doing about 20 miles an hour. And now on those bikes, you know, the handlebars are down here, and you're like this when you're riding, so your field of vision doesn't go much far beyond your front wheel. And I'm riding along there, clipping good, and all of a sudden, right there in front of me is a big old fat possum. And I swerved to the right to miss him, and my tire hit a rock, and I went off the road down about a 10 or 12 foot steep embankment into the bottom of a ditch, butt over bicycle. And when I kind of shook myself loose down there, you know, those things, you have clips where you clip into the pedals. You can't just jerk your feet off, you know. Well, I untangled from the machine and drug it and myself back up on the roadbed. And I was able to ride it on home, and I was telling a neighbor about it not too long after that, and he looked at me quizzically, and he asked me a pretty sensible question. He said, "Why didn't you just hit the possum? You'd have gone down, but it wouldn't have been off in that bar ditch." We're the biker. PJI is the possum. Maybe it's time we got a little bit more positive and aggressive about responding to their demand that we be done away with. And maybe we all get a little bit better involved.